Thank you, Roshan, for organizing that and giving us the opportunity to present our work. Again, as Roshan said, I'm Helmut Rock. I'm the administrator with Plant Industry Division with Hawaii Department of Agriculture for a 16-month almost here. And so before we get into the particular presentations, I want to just present our Plant Industry Division and tell you a little bit what we do and how we do things in general terms, and then my colleagues will give you more details about our work. So our Plant Industry Division consists of three branches or programs. Oh, you got the sound back on here. It sounded, yeah, I can hear feedback. All right. So, sorry again. It consists of three branches of programs with the mission to protect Hawaii's unique natural resources and agriculture economy from invasive pests. So our largest branch, due to the role of protecting Hawaii on multiple fronts, is our plant quarantine branch. Its mission is to prevent introduction of invasive species in the first place by implementing our statutory authority and regulations. So you can tell emphasis is on
join the meeting.
Sorry. Prevention, as we know, is more economic than reacting to a pest once it has become established. And this is our first barrier of defense. We have strict rules that regulate the import of commodities and animals. As you know, when you enter Hawaii from the continental US and fill out the declaration forms in the plains. I hope you do. Our plant quarantine inspectors usually check incoming cargo and also commercial carriers for unwanted pests. Currently, we have 91 staff in our PQ branch, but we still have over 26 vacancies still to fill. So, as you know, however, not everybody respects the stop sign at the intersection. So our second barrier of defense is actively searching for pests that are not known to occur in Hawaii. Our common approach is called EDRR, that's early detection and rapid response. Unfortunately, due to limited resources and personnel, as you know, we rely on the cooperation and coordination with you, our partners, to set up traps and surveys for invasive pests here in Hawaii. So in general terms, there's actually a well-established system in place in the US between the federal US Department of Agriculture, APHIS, and its PPQ branch, and the state agencies of agriculture. In most US states, it's the State Department of Agriculture, which is the regulatory authority for invasive pests. Except in two states, Kentucky and South Carolina, where the land-grant universities are the regulatory authorities. So PPQ, Plant Protection and Quarantine, for USDA, and the states, we have a memorandum of understanding, cooperating in detection surveys and also in eradication programs for invasive pests of importance on federal and also on state level. The surveys are usually funded through the CAPS program that stands, sorry for all the acronyms, that stands for Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey, and the Farm Bill funded PPA, that's Plant Pest Act 7721 program. So these two programs fund our surveys for federally regulated pests and also pests for state concerns. So in each state, there's a structure in place to coordinate and collaborate between the feds and the state. On the federal side, there are, again, acronyms, sorry for that. It's called SPUT. It stands for State Plant Health Director, and PSS, that's the Pest Survey Specialist. And on our side, on the state side, it's the SPRO, the State Plant Regulatory Official, and the SSC, the State Survey Coordinator. Our federal partners, as you know, have the authority on our international borders, protecting us from invasive pests entering on commodities or passengers coming from overseas. So before 9/11, those ag inspectors worked under USDA APHIS. Now our ag inspectors are actually in the Department of Homeland Security, in the Customs and Border Protection Agency, implementing APHIS's regulations for import. So how do we decide what to look for in terms of invasive pests? So our federal partner has a huge program that evaluates the risk of exotic species entering the country. Pest risk analysis, the technical term we use to evaluate the risk of known pest species in foreign countries that we have intense trade with and that can arrive and establish in the US. Well, as you know, reality is that many recent pests have been on nobody's radar, such as brown marmot stinkbug, spotted lanternfly, spotted wing Drosophila, just to name a few. So you can see the system is not perfect. But as you know, we currently have about 1 million insect species that are known to science, and there are many, many more species still out there that haven't been even described yet. So this is a daunting task for everybody. On the state side, we have the State Plant Regulatory Official, which is my other title, who is the regulatory authority in the state and works together with the federal State Plant Health Director. So all SPROs are usually organized in regional plant boards and also in the national plant board. Hawaii belongs to the Western Plant Board, which is the oldest plant board in the country. We had our 100th anniversary meeting back in 2019 in California, when we still could meet before COVID, because in California is where the Western Plant Board started. Founding members back then included Baja California and British Columbia. They're no longer official members. We included British Columbia as an associate member, but they're no longer on the communication list because of potential impact of foreign trade if there's any discussion that we have to have internally. We usually invite our British Columbia representative to come to our meetings. I've never been able to get a hold of our friends in Baja California and Mexico. And since 2018, I'm the president of the Western Plant Board, and I'm also part of the board of directors of the National Plant Board. So we usually meet regularly in person, and we have conference calls every month. One is tomorrow again. And we have direct communications and meetings with the executive team of PPQ, that includes the deputy administrator of PPQ, and also representatives of CBP to coordinate plant protection and safeguarding measures and policies for the entire US. So as I said, it does happen though that some invasives may get past our first two barriers. And that's because apart from limited resources and personnel, in many cases, we just don't always have good trapping methods to early detect invasives. Again, good examples are brown marmot stinkbugs, spotted lanternflies, many exotic wood bearers and, well, fruit flies. We have some traps. They're not very specific, and they're just generic traps that attract our targets, compared to, for instance, very specific traps that we use for instance, the gypsy moth trapping program that use highly specific sex pheromones to catch the males, in this case in general, or our Japanese beetle program, where we use sex pheromone to lure in the males, and we use a floral lure to attract also females. So it does happen that invasives get past our barrier methods and are able to establish. That is when our third barrier comes in place. Of course, the idea is to early detect a new invasive so we can quickly eradicate it. Usually what happens is once we detect a new invasive, we need to define how far it has spread. So we implement a delimitation survey. We also analyze what methods do we have actually to eradicate an incipient population. And just using incipient population is basically a new pest that is trying to establish itself in a new area. We use that, so we have different terms. We call it a regulatory incident if we find it coming into the border. One time, one bug, never found again, that's a regulatory incident. If we have incipient population, means there is a kind of a beach head or whatever that's called, that trying to establish itself. So depending on the detection methods, we can make that call if eradication is feasible. Once it is past eradication, we have to establish management measures. So our plant pest control branch is, in general terms, responsible for responding to incursions of invasive pests. We respond also, of course, to noxious invasive weeds. No? We're using herbicides or other methods. So speaking of pesticides, my third branch is the pesticides branch that registers and regulates all pesticides in the state, and also regulates pesticide vendors and applicators. So another method to long-term manage invasive pests is our biocontrol program. And Hawaii is one of the leaders in the country and also in our region in biocontrol efforts and successes. You will hear more details from my colleagues about our biocontrol programs later in the program. So to wrap up my introduction, here are a few highlights of our recent work. Last year, we introduced an interim rule to slow down the spread of the coconut rhinoceros beetle, which we are trying to convert currently in a permanent rule in the next few months. We also drafted a firewood rule to address the huge risk of importing exotic and invasive wood-boring pests to Hawaii. We're one of the last states in the country without a specific firewood rule here. We're also working on a strategic plan for LFA, little fire, and then also we're working on a strategic plan for the coqui frog. We are expanding our efforts with regional and international experts on finding more successful control and maybe eradication methods, there we go, for LFA and other invasive ants. Similar, we're working on that with coqui frogs. So while we're working on these rules, I just mentioned the CRB and firewood, we have the opportunity to review our regulations on import to Hawaii, that's Chapter 70, and also on the inter-island movement, which is Chapter 72. The reason is some of our statute and our regulations go back before statehood and desperately need review and updating. Keep in mind, many of our efforts and successes can only happen in coordination and collaboration with you, with our many partners. So thank you for that. So now let's start with the presentations of the folks that actually do the work I just described. So let's start with our plant quarantine branch. Chris Kishimoto will describe our process to import animal species to Hawaii, such as biocontrol agents, followed by Noni Putnam, who will describe our work on pogie frogs, followed by Janice Matsunaga from our PPC branch, describing sampling and submitting protocols for new detections. Darcy Ohishi will present what happens after an initial identification of a new invasive species. And wrapping up will be Dr. Mohsen Ramadan with his presentations of some of our successful biocontrol projects. Thank you, and let's get started.
Let's see. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Kishimoto. I'm with the Hawaii Department of Agriculture's Plant Quarantine Branch, and I'm here today to discuss some a little bit of import regulations with you guys. So what does the Hawaii Department of Agriculture's Plant Quarantine Branch regulate? Well, we actually regulate quite a few things. Our authority lies in Chapter 150A of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. That gives us the authority to, regulate a lot of plant products and plant parts imports, non-domestic animal imports. We even regulate a lot of microorganisms that are imported into the state, and we do have interstate regulations as well. There's other branches and divisions within the department that also have their own regulations for imported things and things that currently also already occur in the islands, such as the animal industry division regulates the import of all the domestic animals, a lot of the things you can find on farms, or dogs, cats, things of that nature. And even the plant pest control branch, as Helmuth was mentioning, regulates has a lot of their own regulations that they use for regulating invasive species that already occur within the state. We also try to observe the requirements of other agencies where relevant or applicable. That extends to federal agencies as well as other state agencies and county agencies as well. So in short, we regulate pretty much anything from a blue whale, if you wanted to bring in like redwoods and stuff, of course, not as big as in this picture, but, we regulate all of that stuff all the way down to, insects, things that may be the size of little fire ant or even smaller than that, like parasitoid wasps are a really good example. And all the way down to the microorganism level. We're talking like funguses, bacteria, viroids, viruses, even like things like prions and stuff are things that we would regulate. So why do we regulate so many things? Basically that's our way of protecting Hawaii from other organisms that are potentially harmful to our agriculture or horticulture industries, our natural resources, or even animal and public health. That's why we regulate so many things. Case in point, a lot of people like to bring in ladybugs because they think that's a really good alternative to chemical pesticide applications in their gardens or their farms, and that's not always necessarily correct. Biocontrol agents, especially generalist predators like ladybugs, also have their own sets of negatives that come along with releasing them into our environment here in Hawaii. If you want to import fish or shrimp or something, say for aquaculture purposes, or even for your aquariums, that's all stuff we regulate, because a lot of those things can become, as we've seen, can become quite invasive when released into the environment. And we even, as I said, regulate the import of microorganisms. So that picture on the right is actually has the active ingredient Bovaria bassiana, which is an insect entomopathogenic fungus that's used heavily to control coffee berry borer. That's something that that we had to regulate and was quite an intensive process to get approval to bring that in, actually. So the process I'm talking about is basically the board approval process. So quite a bit of import requests need to go through this process. Some examples of things that need board approval would be any animal that is not on the Department of Ag's list of conditionally approved organisms. We have several lists, but all of them need board approval except animals that are on the conditionally approved list. Also, microorganisms that are listed as restricted A, which is kind of higher risk, or that are not on the department's list of microorganisms but are deemed high risk. Some of the reasons why people want to bring these things in is for research, a lot of biocontrol programs, things that need to go to the Board of Agriculture for their review also includes putting an organism on one of HDOA's lists, or even changing it from one list to another that requires Board of Agriculture approval. And even things like updating or establishing new permit conditions for some of the current organisms on our list need Board of Ag approval. And just, to be honest, it's a very, very labor intensive. It's a very labor intensive kind of a deal here, both for the permit applicants, the people that want to import these organisms, as well as for the Department of Agriculture staff that have to work on these. It's very time consuming as well. So this is just a diagram that I put together real quick to kind of show everything that's needed. Some steps are missing, but most of the important things are listed here, just to show you. Yeah, it's pretty intensive, this process. The bottom row in green are extra steps which are necessary if we're going to do a rule change, which a lot of these things require, especially if you're talking about putting a new organism on one of our lists or changing the list placement of an organism. That all requires a rule change. And it goes all the way up to having to get the governor's approval. The governor actually has to sign off on these things in order for these things to happen. And then it has to be filed with the lieutenant governor's office too. So you can see, it's quite an undertaking to get these things done. But to simplify things, these are some of the important things to remember. Please submit the completed permit application and submittal package to us as soon as you can. Everything is kick-started for us with the receipt of a completed permit application. Some things you want to include in your submittal package would be things like what you're planning on, what you would like to import, why you're planning on importing it, how it affects the environment. Is it going to have a positive impact? Hopefully not a negative one. Please include a lot of supporting data. Include literature review when possible, anything that helps support what your request is going to be. And another thing, which is not discussed too much, is the need for possible environmental review if necessary. So if you're going to be using state or county land, funding, or even state or county employees in your project, chances are you're going to have to do an environmental assessment, and you can either get an EA exemption if possible, or you have to get a finding of no significant impact. If necessary, you might even have to do a full-blown environmental impact statement, and that's a total other can of worms that you got to worry about. There are also at least 3 layers of reviews officially. There are subcommittees, of which we have several. We have subcommittees for entomology, land vertebrates, aquatic and invertebrate biota, and we actually have 3 subcommittees for microorganisms, fungus, bacteria, and virus. And they're made up of our technical and subject matter experts. Then our second layer of review is the Plant and Animal Advisory Committee, which is made up of state agency designees and other experts, as well as some members of the business community. And finally, we have the Board of Agriculture. The Board of Agriculture is the one that ultimately decides if your request is going to be approved or not. And this is made up of a lot of state agency heads, such as the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Department of Health, it also consists of experts and business community members as well. There are going to be at least 2 public meetings. That's going to be the Plant and Animal Advisory Committee meeting and the Board of Agriculture meeting. It's very important that the applicants or the people that want to bring in these organisms attend to answer any questions, as they are the ultimate subject matter experts. And their attendance is very important. I've seen a couple of instances where the committee or the board has deferred making a decision to a later meeting because the applicants did not show up or attend the meetings. So a quick case study is something that just happened, and it's a request to import the southern house mosquito, Culex quinquefasciatus. So basically, a little over a year ago, we received an official application from both the Department of Land and Natural Resources and the Department of Health to import live mosquitoes. So they wanted to import 3 different species: Aedes albopictus, Aedes aegypti, and Culex quinquefasciatus. The mosquitoes would be inoculated with a strain of bacteria called Wolbachia, which is different than the Wolbachia bacteria that naturally occurs in Hawaii. And when 2 insects that have different strains of Wolbachia bacteria mate, the resulting offspring are sterile, and a lot of times they don't survive at all. So they wanted to import male mosquitoes to release them into the wild to control mosquitoes out in the environment and to decrease the populations of these mosquitoes in the environment, which would in turn help protect our native bird species, as well as protecting public health, say in case something like dengue or something actually came to Hawaii again. This request was a little bit complicated. It was kind of complex. Part of the reason why is because the bacteria was purposely introduced into the mosquitoes. It would require this request to be reviewed by both our subcommittee on bacteria, as well as our subcommittees on entomology, because live mosquitoes were also being imported. It took almost a year of a lot of back and forth questions and answers between the Department of Ag and the applicants. We did a lot of follow-ups, meetings, including meetings with the shippers that were going to be shipping these mosquitoes to Hawaii, and a lot of research as well. Although the project seemed very sound and it seemed like it would have very minimal impact, a very minimal negative impact on the environment, it was pretty controversial, because anytime you're trying to bring in mosquitoes, I think a lot of people get worried. So the Department of Agriculture had to do a lot of their due diligence. So, when it came time when people questioned why we allowed this to happen, we could show them a lot of the data, a lot of the evidence and proof of why this would be a good idea. So in May 26 of this year, this request was finally presented to our subcommittee on entomology. A couple weeks later, it was presented to our committee on plants and animals at their meeting. They recommended approval to the Board of Agriculture, and a couple of weeks later, it finally got approved from our Board of Agriculture. But a lot of work went into this. I'm sure if you ask Cynthia from DLNR, she would agree that this is a very, very intensive process. So some final thoughts I have for you guys is please ask us about importing and our regulatory requirements as soon as possible. No matter what you want to bring in, it's always a good idea to give us a call or shoot us an email as soon as possible, because if there's any regulatory requirements that have to be worked out, we can get to work on that as soon as possible. Some questions to think about also when you're planning on wanting to import something in is what its effects on the environment are going to be. How is it also going to affect agriculture, Hawaii's native flora and fauna, and even public health? Think about how you're going to safeguard these organisms in a way that prevents theft or accidental release. Also a good idea to have a plan in place if there is an accidental release, what you're going to do. Think about the possible need for environmental review, which is a requirement if you're going to be using state or county lands, funding, employees, etc. And be aware that there could be other agency requirements which the Department of Ag would also try and enforce as well. And these could be, as I mentioned before, federal agency requirements, other state requirements, and even other county requirements. And lastly, please also be aware that this Board of Agriculture review process does take time and is very laborious. So please keep that in mind. That's why it's very important to ask us about all these things as quickly as possible, as soon as you want to plan on doing a project or a release of this nature. Thank you very much. I'm the entomologist with the plant quarantine branch. So I work on a lot of the insect applications, but Noni Putnam will be following me as our land vertebrate specialist. So, she's the person to contact about bringing in a lot of vertebrate species. Will Leon Guerrero handles all of our microorganism import requests. Trenton Yasui handles a lot of our aquatic biota and invertebrates. So he's a good person. He's a person to see and talk to about, if you want to do aquaculture or any kind of pet or seafood imports. Todd Suda is our biotechnology specialist. He's stationed in Maui. Clayton Nagata is our nursery specialist who's stationed in Hilo. And Kent Dumlau is our outreach and education specialist. Should you ever need, a lot more information, a lot more general information about the plant quarantine branch and what we do. But thank you very much.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Good.
All right. Thank you. So as Roshan stated, my name is Noni Putnam, and I'm the land vertebrate specialist for the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. And I'm just gonna give some general information regarding some of the stuff that I take care of. It's gonna be just brief and provide some information and data for you guys. All right, like I said, I'm going to be discussing, Oahu Koki frog responses and captures for 2022 on Oahu, and then gonna follow up with the updates for the brown tree snake program for 2022, and then also include some land vertebrate pest referral information and numbers for you. All right, for Koki frog, the Koki frog was accidentally introduced into Hawaii from Puerto Rico in about 1988. In 2006, Koki frogs were designated as a pest for control and eradication under Chapter 141-3 Hawaii Revised Statutes. And then in 2009, it was amended, or Chapter 4-69A was amended to include the Koki frogs as a pest for control and or eradication. So far to date, total number of responses on Oahu includes 108, and total number of Koki frogs captured on Oahu is 927. More than half of these captures are in the Waimanalo area where we did also conduct treatment, multi-agent treatment, which I will discuss in a little bit. Total number of treatments include 3. And as I said, in May, there was a multi-agency effort, which included HDOA, DLNR, HISC, as well as OISC to eradicate, control coqui frog infestation in a remote mountain area of Waimanalo with the use of a helicopter aerial application of citric acid solution. Since 2019 till present, we were able to eradicate approximately 7 areas that were known to have coqui frogs. Just as a update, the term eradication is used, for properties that previously had coqui frogs on property, but through response, captures, and monitoring have been coqui free for more than a year. Moving on, this shows a map of the coqui captures for 2022. Just gives a aerial view of the captures for this year. These are some photos from the Waimanalo site. It just shows perspective in the type of terrain that we are dealing with in Waimanalo. All right, moving forward to the BTS program update for 2022. Some background information includes the Hawaii Department of Agriculture Plant Quarantine Branch is the state's lead agency for the inspection and clearance of air and sea arrivals, including cargo, equipment, and vehicles from the U.S. territory of Guam and other high-risk areas where brown tree snakes are determined to be established. For BTS inspections and surveillance, our current BTS projects include visual inspections, includes our Hawaii Detector Dog program, as well as BTS survey, monitoring, and our trapping program. We also do fence line spotlighting program as well. And we do, it's not listed on here though, but we do continue to do rapid response training when it's available, as well as training for our new inspectors through our department's program in Guam handling brown tree snakes. Sorry. All right, for visual inspections, PQB continues to conduct visual inspections of high-risk BTS arrivals at various ports of entry throughout the state. Most BTS inspections are conducted on overtime due to the majority of the flights arriving during the off-duty hours. This photo depicted is some of the cargo that is inspected, or what we can find in aircrafts that are inspected. So the Hawaii Dog Detector Program continues to form alliances with our partners in the transportation industry. Trained canine teams are utilized to detect BTS on arriving aircraft, sea vessels, cargo, and any other regulated articles from high-risk BTS areas. As mentioned before, examples include U.S. territory of Guam, northern and eastern coastal Australia, etc. And it's just any place where BTS is known to be established. So in these photos, we have on the left, we have Joffrey inspecting some cargo on an aircraft, followed by canine Kai, who's conducting his inspection on some equipment, followed by Rains, who's doing his inspection on some cargo. And then the last photo on the right is inspection of Portia, conducting some training exercises regarding aircrafts. All right, for the BTS survey monitoring trapping program, PQB continues to conduct surveying and monitoring activities to determine the presence or absence of BTS in and around the ports of entry that are high risk for BTS establishments and or movement. Moving forward, we're going to be showing, I'll be showing some maps of where our traps are located on HICM. So this is an example or a map that depicts the trap that is at the command post on HICM Air Force Base. This is another map depicting BTS traps in the ATOC, EMC, and Clearwater areas. This is a map that depicts traps located at the Hot Cargo and Moot Village. And then we also actually have some traps located on the DKIIA, or the Daniel K. Inouye International Airport as well. Currently, we have approximately 33 traps set up. As for the BTS traps, we use live mice, and the traps are maintained 3 times a week. Occasionally, we sometimes catch wild mice, rats, as well as mongooses. As for this map, this shows the spotlighting route that we use. Spotlighting route is roughly approximately 5 miles and conducted weekly. So this just shows the routes that we use around the base. For the BTS activity report, this report is from January 2022 to June 2022. We're currently working on the next period, which I don't have that information, but during this period, there was approximately 716 arrivals. Of those 716 arrivals, 714 were inspected. So 99.7% of all arriving aircrafts from BTS known areas were inspected. All right, moving along, this just shows some pest referral information from our department. The total number of pest referrals that our office received was a total of 318, and that's just from January till now. These pest referrals include not only land vertebrate animals, but aquatic, disease reports, insects reports, or any type of other reports. So I'm just gonna be talking about the land vertebrate pest referrals. So to date, we have received approximately 254 reports for just land vertebrate animals alone. Some of the top species that we did receive reports from include coqui frogs, greenhouse frogs, turtles include red and yellow eared sliders, lizards include iguanas, Cuban nidanoles. For the geckos, Madagascar giant day geckos and mourning geckos. Sorry. Some things that's not listed on here. This year we did have a few stowaways and hitchhikers. In June, a live skunk was captured at Pier 1 at the Honolulu Harbor. In July, a live skunk was captured at the Kapolei Home Depot. Sorry, in July, a live snake was captured at the Kapolei Home Depot. And then in August, a live skunk was captured by DLNR in the Kanaha Pond Wildlife Sanctuary area. It's not listed on here, but we do conduct investigations. We work alongside the Hawaii Department of Attorney General's Investigation Division to conduct investigations. So far with land vertebrate animals, we've conducted about 15. Let's see. We do have our amnesty program. Our amnesty program, it's the state's amnesty program, allows for voluntary surrender of illegal animals. No penalties will be assessed if a person voluntarily turns in prohibited species before investigation is initiated. So thankful for our amnesty program. We do receive different types of animals or reports, such as possums, raccoons, snakes, along those lines regarding our amnesty program. Let's see. That's all I have to prepare, or that's all I have to present. Thank you for your time. And as mentioned, it takes all of us to help protect Hawaii.
So my name is Janice, and I'm the taxonomic entomologist at the HUA Plant Pest Control Branch. And one of the main functions of my job is to identify new and invasive plant pests to agriculture, horticulture, and the environment in Hawaii. So today I'm going to be giving a quick tutorial on best practices for recording, reporting, and identifying possible new invasive pests in Hawaii. And while we want everyone to report any unusual pests, These slides particularly target our partner agencies and relevant plant industries with at least some basic knowledge of invasive pests in Hawaii. If a potential new invasive pest species is being reported, we request that you contact us directly so we can follow up in a timely manner. Members of the public should submit a report to 643pest.org with their pest concerns.
Janice,
Yes.
just can you do it in a presentation mode? This is in
Oh,
different
is it
mode.
not? Sorry. What are you seeing right now?
We are seeing the next slide and so on. You have notes also.
Oh, okay.
Just, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Mhm.
Dennis, if you
Okay,
have
yes.
2 screens, swap displays.
I'm gonna switch cameras to mine.
Yes. Now presentation.
So what are you seeing right now? Sorry.
Still, it needs to be done something here.
Okay, hold on.
Mhm. Yes. No.
Okay,
Still.
sorry about
No.
that.
Still. We are
Oh.
seeing your notes.
Oh.
Yes. Better. Now.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, great.
While I was waiting, I got a little thrown off, so I needed to read from my notes.
Sorry,
Okay.
Janice. Darcy, we can hear you and Helmet talking. Thank you.
Okay, hold on. 1 second.
Sorry, Janice, my bad.
No, thank you. Okay. Let me just get readjusted here. Okay. Where was I? Oh, one thing I want to bring up is, if any agency receives a pest report and it is something that should not be here and that requires immediate action, please do not refer the reporter to 643pest.org, or you yourself, please do not go there to file a pest report. Contact us directly so that we can take action immediately. With that, I just wanted to mention in 2022, so far, we have been notified of just a couple of new invasive plant pests, insect plant pests, and a couple of alien species which are not technically classified as invasive, several new beneficial species, and a couple of other parasitoids of arthropods. So early detection and reporting of new non-native plants, animals, insects, and diseases is a critical component of our response to invasive species. The first step in dealing with any pest or disease issue is correctly identifying the pest. And a rapid response and eradication effort may be dependent on an early detection report and quick ID. Most often there's a lag time from when a species establishes and to when it's actually detected, reported, and identified. And so by the time it's actually identified, a significant amount of time possibly has passed, leading to an increase in population size, density, and distribution. So an early and accurate ID of a new invasive pest may help to, as an early and accurate idea of an invasive pest may also help secure eradication funding from outside sources, such as the federal government like USDA and whatnot. A correct ID allows the most effective control methods to be selected. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. A mistaken identification can lead to improper control tactics that cost time and money and may have negative impacts to the environment. An incorrect ID may lead to killing of beneficial organisms or native species, and an early and accurate ID of a new invasive pest may help to secure eradication funding and support. Oh, I already said that. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the accuracy of a disease diagnosis depends on the quality of the sample and completeness of the information provided. And that goes the same with insect samples as well. So diagnosis or identification is only as good as the sample and information provided to us. So we always want, fresh samples and good digital images. And I'll get into that in the coming slides. And of course, rapid delivery is always critical. So this is just a basic timeline of steps that should take place in the event that a probable new invasive plant pest species is detected. So first, the observation and recording of data, taking photos, collecting samples, and reporting and submitting samples and data, and then the identification of the pest, then surveys and limiting surveys and whatnot, then review and analyze data. And from there, eradication control methods will be evaluated. So some observation and photo recording tips here for probable insect damage. You want to take lots of photos, zoomed out of the entire plant, zoomed in on the damage as well. When possible, always include a scale, like a point or ruler, a pencil, whatever you have. Make sure the lighting is good and everything's sharp. And same for larger infestations such as scale insects, zoomed out, zoomed in, clear and in focus digital photos. And when possible, please include the scale. And for plant diseases, you need to take a little more photos to show healthy parts of the plant as well as the parts exhibiting symptoms. If there's symptoms on leaves, take photos of the tops and bottoms of leaves. And recording data. So this is something that I really want to stress because people tend to just say, oh, I saw this, what is it? But what's really important in finding an accurate identification is having the data to go with it, the who, what, where, when, and how, and incidence and severity. So we always want to know who the collector is. You may not think it is important, but we keep this information with our samples when we vulture them. What is the host plant species? That's extremely important, especially for plant diseases. Location, island, city, county, specific area, and GPS points. When was this collected? When was this first noticed? When were the symptoms first noticed? How, describe the issue. How long has it been a problem? What the symptoms are? How have the symptoms progressed over time? And for incidence, percentage of the plants affected, and severity, measure of impact on a plant. And collecting samples for insects and related arthropods, more is always better. So if you think it's a new pest, and you see an outbreak like this, collect everything. We need multiple life stages, and you can just put them in vials or containers. Please do not crush them in bags when you have them alone. But sometimes it's easier to just cut off branches with the insects on them, and then you can just place those in Ziploc bags. Beetles, flies, or hoppers, hemipterans, true bugs, you can freeze them until you submit them or keep them in 70% ethanol. In the case of sap-sucking insects like scale insects, thrips, and whatnot, even mites, don't try to pick them off the plant or you might squish them. So just, take cuttings or the entire fruit. Don't freeze them. Just keep the sample in the fridge in a bag and submit them immediately. If it's larvae like caterpillars and whatnot. Make sure that you also collect enough host plant material to keep them alive. And for plant diseases, you want to avoid submitting any dead plants. You want to choose plants that show a range of symptoms from moderate to severe in collecting and taking photos. Due to secondary infections in extremely decayed plants, it's difficult to determine which organisms have created the first problem or were the primary invaders. If possible, send in plants with a range of symptoms. Diseases may show up on any part of the plant. So in some cases, you may want to dig up the roots and whatnot. And you can place the entire plant or plant parts in a Ziploc bag after adding a dry paper towel or newspaper to protect the sample from the moisture. So reporting and submitting, you can send an email to us here, hua.ppc@hawaii.gov, include your photos as attachments and all the data that you collected. And the responders will advise you on how to submit the physical samples and for follow-up. And as a note, what not to submit: do not submit blurry photos, overexposed photos. Please do not leave samples to rot, and not improper packaging, like mailing insects directly in envelopes and then sending them to the USPS mail. And please do not submit things without any background collection information. So the next step, is preliminary identification. So I would do or figure out if it's a possible new state or US record and send things to the USDA's National Identifier Specialist at the Smithsonian and other areas. And from there, they would just give the confirmation that, it is a new state or US record. And then they would send the information on to other states and whatnot, other ag departments throughout the US. So we would do surveys for delimiting surveys and collect data from the field, including other possible host plants and pest infestation incidents and whatnot, literature searches, and collection and database searches. And then review and analyze the data and produce maps and whatnot, review the field data and literature, and usually we'll be asked to do USDA risk reports and participate in possible working groups depending on the severity of the invasive pests. And from there, Darcy's going to take over for the response. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Janice. Okay, so next is Darcy OC. He's an entomologist and heads plant pest control branch, Hawaii Department of Ag. Darcy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm actually going to be talking more in my federal role as the state survey coordinator for the Pacific region, which includes Hawaii, American Samoa, Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands, and Guam. Mike Melzer is actually the SSC for Hawaii as he's receiving the funding for our federal infrastructure grant. So I'm going to start to some extent where we're going to overlap a little bit with Janice, and the focus of my talk is actually going to be the decision and information gathering process that we go through and our various points of engagement with USDA. These are functions that are unique to Hawaii Department of Agriculture and really color how we respond to invasive pest species. But first, the helmet made reference to an MOU between USDA and it's with every Department of Agriculture has a separate MOU. And we have an obligation to report new plant pests as they are detected in the state, or more appropriately within the Pacific region right now. And that report has to be submitted within 48 hours of us becoming aware of it. So Roshan, you were asking what happens if we if there are pests that we don't know about, and this is always the case. We try to scour the literature, and but really what I want to highlight is why people need to report to us. And it shouldn't be, reports shouldn't be held up because you want to publish something, because there are ramifications as it relates to obtaining potential funding. There could be regulatory issues that pop up, and triggering our cascade does not mean you're not going to be the first author on a publication or something like that. So after we receive a sample and we make an ID, whether that's Janice on the entomology side, or even myself on the plant pathology side, we then send it in for confirmation from USDA. So this gets routed through our plant inspection station, through a process, and NIS, the National Identification Services, will then take a look at the samples and render confirmed, or in case it's a topic that we do not have expertise on, or a firm ID, render an outright identification. As Janice stated, what happens with NIS is National Identification Services, not only do they give us an ID, they will tell us the pest status. If it's new to Hawaii, new to the country, we've even had cases where we're the first to report a pest within the hemisphere. I don't like getting those. And this then triggers a whole cascade of events. And so I'll share my screen. So this is actually an actual identification that was rendered based upon a sample that we submitted for coffee leaf rust. And there were other better examples that I could use, but I forgot that USDA switched its language with the adoption of the ARM database, and there no longer is phrases like actionable and reportable pests. So although coffee leaf rust was already in the transition point, so one of the key things that we look at in addition to the final ID is these remarks here, which in this case, coffee leaf rust is not known to occur in Hawaii, and it's considered, but in the communication and in subsequent emails that are sent to the state plant regulatory official, Helmet, it'll tell us that whether USDA deems this as an actionable or reportable pest, or in the modern parlance that USDA is using, it's a quarantine pest of concern for the region. And I can give a whole hour presentation on how those evaluations and determinations are made in consultation with Hawaii Department of Ag, but that's not the topic. So, in this case, actionable, reportable for Hawaii means that we can request additional resources for assistance. So this is something like coconut rhinoceros beetle, where we triggered a whole bunch of a whole significant cascade in terms of USDA basically superpowering the HDOA response. Before we even get the ID, we're already beginning our process where we're filling out what we know when USDA will ask for this, which is a pest information worksheet. And USDA begins asking us a series of questions that allow them to basically help us in a more proactive manner and allows them to dedicate resources to assist us. And this is whether the pest is a quarantine significance to USDA for Hawaii or not. So they want basic information on the interception, where it's detected, host details on the host, damage that was observed, the degree of infestation, trade significance, whether it's in the nursery, the distribution. So and the distribution is a key element here because they want to know if this is of a regulatory significance or as a interception or if it's an established pest. Other observations that have been made, and in this case, it could be observations that the department may have made or citizen scientists. Is this a pest of concern to us? And sometimes our answer is we don't know, we need assistance. What actions we're taking or planning to take, how we're going to be engaging in surveys, who's going to be conducting them, how, and any sensitive issues, the community and stakeholders that we engage in, and any outreach and research that we're going to be conducting. These questions form the basis that for our communication with USDA, which then allows us to work with them and their risk analysis folks at to better assist us in terms of, sometimes it's as simple as we need help doing additional literature researches because we don't have all the resources. And this will come into play where we can actually get translations of some of the findings that are already in the literature. Sometimes it's asking for abilities that we do not have based upon the staffing level within my program. So we may be asking, I'll be using pathology language, how this aligns with the disease triangle. And this is just for insects also. Do we have the right environmental conditions? Do we have the host? Do we have temperature ranges that this insect need or pest needs? Is diapause necessary for an insect? Is that diapause daylight based or is it temperature based? All of these questions get formulated in our discussions with USDA, and they'll chew out and spit out answers for us in a fairly quick basis. And then Helmuth and I have another opportunity to present all of this information and ask additional questions if all of these check boxes are met and it triggers what we call a cross-functional working group review. And so cross-functional working group consists of 3 members of USDA. There's someone representing field operations, which is our primary interface with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The policy side of the equation. So they're heavily involved with the identification and determination of what USDA calls port policies in terms of how they respond to a pest. So case in point, coconut rhinoceros beetle has we will respond, we will take action. Acalylepta aesthetica had no overt port policy because it had not appeared on anyone's radar as a potential pest. And then there's which honestly, most of our interceptions and new pests are not listed within the USDA infrastructure as pests, but USDA still provides us with significant help and support in terms of helping us make decisions on what actions that Helmuth and the rest of our team factor into how we structure responses. So for pests like coffee leaf rust or coffee berry borer or coconut rhinoceros beetle, if it is an actionable and reportable pest for the federal government, we can take extreme actions, which could include, as we followed for for coconut rhinoceros beetle, we actually requested what we call a NIMS team, a National Incident Management System team. Our request in late 2013 was a bit special in that we requested the NIMS team be deployed in a different fashion, where the NIMS team could provide active training for HDOA and USDA if we limited it to a command staff, not just including field staff, which is a typical NIMS deployment. Or sometimes we're just asking, as Janice alluded to, for funding. But unless we have an official identification that is routed through USDA, we cannot trigger any of this cascade of actions that lead to USDA support, whether it's just on the analysis side or physical resources, money, staffing, personnel, or even entertaining, whether we go through other programs like Free Stamp, which allows us to assign a port policy based upon USDA, HDOA perceptions on a pest at a federal level. So customs and USDA inspectors can then act on a pest, which is the precursor to the Free Stamp program is actually the port policy for invasive ants for Hawaii, which was done by, pushed through by Neil Reimer back in the day through the support of our Hawaii Ant Group, HAG. But all of these actions are not possible without the ID. And it just can't be, a third party cannot just send it in. We have to have a clear chain of custody on that sample. So the collector has to be known and defined. It has to have a clear handover to the department, so we can submit it to USDA PPQ to trigger all of these actions in terms of a flow chart that we're able to steward. And it's usually this SSC and the pest survey specialists and our respective bosses, the SPRO and SPUD, that are stewarding this whole process to trigger actions and subsequent reactions from USDA. So, there's a whole list of support that USDA imparts to Hawaii Department of Agriculture. And I think Helmuth can probably answer this question better, but not all states have as close a relationship with their federal partners and are able to trigger the kind of cascade of responses that we do so here in Hawaii. And that's largely because my fairy godmother, Vernon Harrington, is very supportive of state actions, and it actively looks for ways to support us. Now, another thing that I didn't talk about so far is we have the ability to trigger trade investigations through the smuggling, interdiction, and trade compliance, SITC. And SITC has helped us on issues like coffee leaf rust and coffee berry borer, and they include trace forward, trace back activities to allow us to, and we work alongside with them and provide information to really tease out what kind of pathways we have, what kind of gaps in our pathways, in our inspection processes and other regulatory processes that we have, so we can then attempt to close those gaps and create a better pre-border system. But as Helmuth has noted, most of our gaps exist right now, not because we see a shift in how plant imports are occurring. We're no longer seeing plant The Food Safety Modernization Act did a tremendous job at changing the weak points within our border systems, not just Hawaii's, but the US as a whole. And now we're seeing most of our problems pop up significantly past the border. And the linkage appears to be through FedEx, UPS, Amazon, eBay. And in some cases, these problems, when we're detecting them, are taking us years to even identify, let alone resolve. So we've had a case that we started in December of last year, really, where citrus plants were imported illegally into Hawaii, and we're still conducting all of the trace backs to identify those plants and get them out of people's hands. And that is an ongoing process. And those violations actually occurred two years or sometimes 3 years ago. And citrus plants are one of the biggest violations of biggest commodities that are actually being smuggled into Hawaii. So